So I want to talk about the issue of resistance, of overcoming resistance, because it's such a common issue for people. And one of the greatest, I mean, you can resist all kinds of things. You can resist, getting up in the morning. You can resist exercise. You can resist doing your work, doing what you need to do. One of the biggest resistances that people have is actually practicing inner bonding, learning to be a loving adult, um, practicing the process. And there's a very good reason for resistance. The reason is that our wounded self, this is our ego self, this is our false self. This is the self that we developed to survive the huge challenges that most of us had as we were growing up. And so we created our wounded self as part of our survival. And this is the part that wants to control and wants to avoid pain, wants to avoid responsibility, wants to protect against getting hurt. It does not want you to become a loving adult. If you become a loving adult, that means that you're connected with your higher guidance. That means that it is no longer guiding you. It is no longer in charge. This is the biggest shift you can make in life, is shifting from your ego wounded self guiding you to your higher self guiding you. It's the most major shift we can make. But the resistance is the wounded self does not want you to do that, does not want you to make that shift, because it loses control. And the wounded self wants control more than anything, does not want to lose control. So lots of times when I start to work with somebody and I'll go through inner bonding with them, and they'll invariably say, oh, this is going to take so much work, or oh, this is so hard, or oh, my past, blah, blah, blah. Can I overcome this, that? That is the wounded self trying to convince you that this is too hard, you can't do it, your past is in the way. There's all sorts of reasons the wounded self has for you not to practice inner bonding, for you to stay in resistance to being a loving adult. Now, the other issue, which I've also talked about, is that for many of us, we had controlling parents. My parents were very controlling. Now, I didn't choose resistance as my main way of surviving. I chose compliance rather than resistance. But a lot of people, I mean, it doesn't really matter what you chose, whether you chose to get mad, whether you chose to comply, to resist. We all made a choice of how to deal with being controlled. So when your choice, your unconscious choice, was to resist being controlled, then you have a resistant aspect of your wounded self that got developed as you were growing up. Now, as I've often said, our wounded self, an aspect of our wounded self, because there's many aspects, many ages, is patterned after our parents and caregivers. So if you find yourself resisting, procrastinating, then you might want to look at the fact that one aspect of your wounded self has absorbed the controlling way of being, the controlling voice of one or both of your parents or siblings or whoever it was that tried to control you. Tune into that voice, because that voice is likely saying, you got to get up early. You got to go exercise. You got to eat well. You got to get this project done on time. You got to be on time for your appointment. You've got to do this. You got to do that. And then what happens is that because you developed a resistant aspect of your wounded self as you were growing up, that part clicks in. That part says, you can't tell me what to do. I don't have to do what you say. You're not the boss of me, and goes into resistance. Now, think about when you were growing up. If you had controlling parents, you likely learned to resist in an area that they couldn't do anything about. Like kids will learn to dawdle, be late, not get dressed, not get to school on time, or they'll hold in their bowels and not get toilet trained, or they'll overeat, or just eat junk, or they won't eat, or they won't learn. They won't do their homework. They won't take a shower. They won't pick up their clothes. I mean, there's so many ways that kids learn to resist when they have a controlling parent. And it frustrates the parent, of course, because the parent can't do anything about it. A child will resist in a way that the parent can't do anything about it, can't make you learn, can't make you fall asleep, for example. So, the child won't sleep, the child will dawdle, can't make you go faster. And so you want to tune in to that controlling part and that resistant part, because that creates an inner power struggle. Of course, I've talked about this before. It's very common to have that inner power struggle. Now, the way out of it is, of course, to be developing your loving adult, because when you're operating out of the loving adult, when your intention is to love yourself, those parts are not operating. If your intention is to control and not be controlled, then the controlling part of your wounded self is operating and the resistant part of your wounded self is operating. But if your intention is to love yourself, those parts are not operating. Then when your intention is to love yourself, then your loving adult is operating. And instead of beating yourself up, telling yourself what you should do, you better do this, you got to do this, the loving adult doesn't do that at all. The loving adult doesn't put any pressure on you, doesn't tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. So it doesn't create the resistance. The loving adult goes to your higher guidance and just asks, what is loving to me? Whether the resistance is happening on an inner level or on an outer level. Let's say somebody asks you to do something, your partner, your boss, somebody asks you to do something, and it triggers that resistant, wounded part of you, and you go into resistance to doing it or doing it on time. That's not what the loving adult does. The loving adult, let's say you're in a relationship and your partner asks you to do something for them. What the loving adult does is go to your higher guidance and say, is this loving to me to do this? And if it is, you'll say yes. And if it isn't, you'll say no. But you're not going to be reactive to that person. You're not going to either comply, like I used to do, just give in and comply, or resist, because that's what the wounded self does. You're going to go to your guidance and say, what's in my highest good? And whatever is in your highest good is going to be in the highest good of your partner as well, whether they like it or not at that moment. Let's say your partner says, I know I'm supposed to do the dishes tonight, but I can't do them. Would you do them? Now you go to your guidance and you say, is it loving to me? And your guidance might say, yeah, you've got the time. Your partner's really busy. You got the time. Go ahead and do this. Even though it's the other person's night to do it, it's fine. Just go ahead and do it for yourself and for your partner. But your higher guidance might say, you've had an exhausting day. You don't have time either. And it's not loving to you to give yourself up and do this, even though your partner's asking for it, in which case you would say, we're both wiped out. Let's just leave it for the morning. And you would say no. And so your answer, yes or no, would not be coming from a wounded place. It would be coming from your loving adult connected to your guidance. It wouldn't be a resistant or compliant response. It would be a loving response. So I really want to encourage you to pay attention to that controlling aspect of your wounded self, and particularly in terms of practicing inner bonding, because like I said, the last thing your wounded self wants is for you to practice inner bonding. You'll find all sorts of reasons not to do it. I don't have the time. It's not going to work. I don't know how to do it. Oh, it's just one more thing that I have to do. I've tried everything, and why should this work? I mean, there's just a million reasons that the wounded self has for you not to be learning to be a loving adult. So be aware of that. Be aware of that controlling voice. Be aware of the resistant aspect of your wounded self. Be aware that you have a choice to shift your intention and open to learning, and ask your guidance throughout the day. What is loving to me right now? What is in my highest good right now? And that's how you will overcome your resistance. You can't overcome the wounded self from the wounded self. And so you cannot overcome resistance from the wounded self. And that is about your intention. And being aware of your intention is the most important thing that you can become aware of, because everything follows from your intention. All your thoughts, all your behavior, all your feelings follow from your intention. And so it's so important. See, step one lets us know our intention, because if we feel anything other than peace and fullness inside, our intention is to control, protect, and avoid. We are in our wounded self. And of course, you're going to find yourself there a lot, because that's what you've been practicing your whole life. And that's why step one of inner bonding is being aware of your feelings. That will let you know immediately what your intention is, so that you can change it if you want to. You can go to step two and shift your intention. And like I said, that governs everything. This week's episode is brought to you by the Inner Bonding Masterclass. When you join this membership, you'll be part of a compassionate and supportive community who understands what you're going through and who will help you throughout your healing journey. The Inner Bonding membership is created to provide laser coaching for you and others in the community who may be facing the same struggles, so that you can practice the inner bonding process more effectively and apply it to your life. You also get to vote on the topic that we will focus on in our bi-monthly masterclass. This way, you and the community will always learn about and get guidance on the topic you're requesting most. Go to innerbonding.com/members to join us. You can use the code BENEFIT to get a 10% discount on your registration at checkout. Again, go to innerbonding.com/members.